In this video, we are going to dissect and analyze all of the accidents in qualifying and some of the techniques and things that you can do to prevent these things in such conditions. If you're interested in knowing what this technique is and what my thoughts were on qualifying, definitely keep watching. Welcome back to the channel, guys. There are a lot of things that we need to run through in this video, so we are going to move fairly quickly. I am going to talk technically as well. I'm going to give you some tips on how you can get the car walking and moving forward in these conditions. Let's bring up the Q1 results and see who got kicked out and what that means for the race coming up shortly. So we've got Hamilton, Behrman, Colapinto, Hulkenberg and Guan Yu Zhou out. So that's both Haas cars out. And that's a shame because that car was pretty quick all weekend. So I'm not sure if it was a driver thing. We saw Nico Hulkenberg take pole here, I think in 2012. So it'd be unlikely that it's a driver thing. Perhaps the car just didn't switch on the tires the way that it was switching on the tires in the dry weather conditions. So that's the first thing to note. Second thing to note, every time we cut to Lewis Hamilton, he was literally sliding around like a giraffe. Lewis is amazing in the wet, so it surprises me that this was the situation. And we saw George as well. He did an amazing job, made it into Q3. He qualified second for the race coming up shortly. So what's going on there? Like, why is there such a difference between Hamilton and George? Like, was it a tire temperature thing? Was it a racing line thing? We need to go into this in more detail and double click on the Lewis Hamilton out in Q1 result. We haven't heard from him yet, but I suspect it was just tire temperatures, not quite the right lines. These tires have a very narrow working operating window. And if you're either side of that, the car just simply doesn't work. So like I say, every time we cut to him, the car was sliding around so much. So it did look like a handful to drive. One other thing to note was that Checo Perez was very quick in this session and the Red Bull was pretty quick as well in this session. Checo's known for his very progressive throttle introduction and getting the car walking and moving forward out of slow speed corners and where there was low rear grip at the back of the car. So it was good to see that that played to Checo's strengths and finally he could show like some of the skills that he has. Obviously, we need to talk about the first crash of the session. It was unfortunately Franco Colapinto. I'm going to talk about it from a technical standpoint. I'm also going to talk about it from a human standpoint, which I think is probably the more important thing here. So let's talk about it from a technical standpoint. So I think Franco was also pretty good in this session. He was pretty quick. I think there were times where he was P6. He was always inside the top 10. We saw Alex showed that the Williams had pace as well, but Franco's just got a little bit greedy on the throttle. And then the car has spun around in turn 3. There is a lot of standing water at turn 3. I was saying in previous videos that Franco needs to really revisit what happened in 2016 and work out where the optimal racing lines are. I'm not sure if he did that, but he was the first one to crash there. And like I say, just a bit greedy on the throttle, had a little bit of steering lock on as well. And then the rear let go. Once the cars let go, they're so heavy that they just pretty much slide off into the barrier. So from a technical standpoint, you know, it's experience for Franco. I don't blame him per se. We saw a lot of drivers crash today. We saw Franco. We saw world champions like Fernando Alonso. Lewis Hamilton got kicked out. We saw Carlos Sainz crash. Alex Albon crash. You know, there was Lance Stroll crash. So it's not like, you know, technically I don't want to come down hard on Franco, but I do want to give you some tips and give you some areas where you could potentially avoid this situation moving forward. So what can you do when the car is rear limited for traction? There's a couple of things. Obviously, putting your foot down gentle. That's the first and most important thing. But secondary to that, it's always good to keep the steering wheel straight. Anytime you're steering and adding throttle at the same time, that's when this sort of thing can happen as well. So you want to really square off your corners and make sure that when you put your foot down hard, you've got the steering wheel as straight as possible. We spoke about squaring off these corners yesterday, didn't we? In our video on sprint qualifying. So it's exactly that. It's exactly that technique, just driving more angular through these corners and zigzagging across the racetrack, keeping the steering wheel straight, putting your foot down gently. You can also short shift. So not rev out the gears so much. Every time you rev out the gears, you're going to get wheel spin. It's going to exaggerate that yaw effect. So short shifting and just dulling the revs, getting the car moving. Remember, out of turn 2, the downforce is not active. So you need to move the car forward, get some downforce happening, and then you can, you know, get your foot down a little bit harder. Something else I wanted to speak about on this channel, which I haven't spoken about, which Franco might use this help, is the throttle mapping. I'm going to bring up a picture on the screen in front of you guys now. And the throttle mapping is basically the translation between how much throttle you're putting down and then how much power the engine delivers. Now, a typical throttle mapping setting would be 1-to-1. That is, for 1% throttle, you're going to get 1% power. But in low grip conditions or wet conditions, I like to advise my drivers to run this particular throttle mapping. You can see that for 1% throttle, it's not 1% power. It actually gives you a little bit more time and more space in the low end part of the throttle. And that's something that I think all of the drivers should be adjusting in the throttle mapping. They definitely have control over this in the ECU. That's the engine control unit. And you just literally map in whatever mapping you want and you're comfortable with. And I would definitely have recommended mapping in this throttle mapping to help get the car moving forward and allow more time in that low end throttle zone. Let's talk about it from the human side, guys. Look, I mean, this is where it gets really tricky and really challenging. As a professional athlete, you need good people in your corner. You need people that are going to look after you, that are going to protect you, that are going to give you the right advice and give you the right direction. You need good management. Good coaches and mentors. You need good team personnel. And I can't help but feel that barrier and someone in Franco's corner to just bring him back to the driving and keep him on the straight and narrow. I can't help but feel he doesn't have that in his corner right now. So it's not really like Franco's fault. He's 21. It's the first time he's driven this track. He's new to the wet. Like, you can say that he doesn't have the experience. It's not really his fault. But I think it's the fault of the mature professional adults around his corner to say, yeah, we want to bring you into this team, but we're going to bring you in with the coach and mentor who's going to guide you and support you and keep you on the straight and narrow. Someone to say, Franco, the autographs are not important. The photos are not important. Your social media is not important. You know, talking to girls, doing the interviews is not important. Like, we need to bring everything back to the driving. Formula One is nothing but a meritocracy. What that means is it's a results-based business. You must get the car home. You must be scoring points continuously, consistently. You must be continuing to deliver good results in the only opportunities that you have. And I feel like if I was there helping Franco, that's exactly what I would say to him is, Franco, let's push all that to the side. What's the racing line? What's the throttle mapping? What gears are we going to use? How are we short shifting? What's the tire temperatures? What's the brake balance going to be for this corner? Like, it has to be just focused on the driving. So I don't blame Franco. He's young. He's 21. Like, most of us at 21 were nowhere near like the level of knowledge that Franco has. So I don't think it's fair to blame him, not to mention all of the other crashes that happened in the session. But I think from the human side, obviously he's got a lot going on with his family, the crowd, everyone wants a piece of him. There needs to be a decent coach and mentor in there to say, like, this is how we're going to navigate this situation in the wet. It's important to stay alive. It's important to build confidence and so on. So I feel like he could have used me. Guys, we've spoken about this in our Brazilian preview. We spoke about the wet weather. We spoke about the wet lines. We spoke about what could happen in this situation. So it's like we all knew that this was coming. I think it was a question more of when you crash, not if you crash. So look, that's just the way I read it. That's my professional opinion on it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you think he could have used a more mature, a more professional, guiding, nurturing talent there alongside him this weekend. I'd be keen to hear what you guys think about that. But technically, there's things you can do. Mentally, there's always things you can do. The guy's 21. He's young. He's under so much pressure this weekend from the media and from the fans. I think it just unfortunately got to him. So that's my point of view on the matter. Let's bring up the Q2 results now and see who got kicked out in Q2. So we've got Valtteri Bottas, P11, Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, and Pierre Gasly. So the first crash of the session was Carlos Sainz, who just crashed out of turn one. The same sort of thing happened. Like, all of these accidents that are happening are on throttle. Extremely low revs for Carlos, and all of a sudden, bang, the revs just spiked and then he was in the wall. So that's the sort of thing that the throttle mapping can help with, is just bringing that power in more progressively. So either he's put his foot down too hard, or the throttle mapping is not convenient. The engine power delivery is too much for those conditions. So I don't really think Carlos did much wrong. Like, the car was very dull, and to see that in the wall was quite surprising for me. Lance Stroll's crash was very similar to Franco Colapinto, so technically I'm not going to go into that. It was exactly the same thing, but it was a real shame for Max Verstappen because he was behind Lance Stroll when that happened. He got the yellow flag, therefore, and then that ruined the current lap. When he came around on the existing lap and he was on his flying lap, then he got the red flag as well. So it was just extremely unlucky for Max that Lance ruined both his laps by way of a yellow flag and the red flag. It took about 40 seconds for the red flag to come out after Lance Stroll had crashed. So the question would be, was 40 seconds too long? And was the red flag the right call? I think yes, 40 seconds was too long. Once that car was in the wall, like you got to make a call. It's either going to be red or not red. I don't think it takes 40 seconds. The car wasn't moving anywhere per se. Like it was pretty much off to the side. We had a red for Franco's crash. So, it definitely should have been a red a lot quicker, in my opinion. And should it have been a red? Yes, I believe it should have been a red. I don't think once a car's on the side of the road like that, you can cover it under double yellows. What's the point? It's going to ruin the session anyway. So I think a quick red would have been the right call there. But look, the FIA or stewards have to go through their processes, so God knows what they are. Now, the good news for Max is that if it is wet in the race coming up shortly, he's a master around this track in the wet. He was super quick. So, fingers crossed he can demonstrate his skills to the world and cut through the pack with some good racecraft, some good strategy, and just keep it clean. I'm really looking forward to see how Max gets on. Let's bring up the Q3 results and have a look at them together. So we've got Lando Norris on the pole with a 23.4 and a very good job by George Russell. He only had one crack at the end there, 23.5. So that was a very good strategy. Yuki Tsunoda, Liam Lawson there in 3 and 5. Amazing job by them. And Esteban Ocon, of course, P4. Charles Leclerc, the only Ferrari in the top 10. Alex Albon, Piastri, P8. Look at that. So big difference between the McLaren drivers there. And then you've got Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll. They need to repair both of those cars, but they'll be starting P9 and P10 if they can repair those cars. I think a really good job by Alex despite his crash. I mean, he showed once he was in P2, so he showed that the pace of the car was there, and it was unlucky with that crash. So unlike all of the other crashes that we saw, he locked the rear brakes coming into turn 1. So that's an interesting one. We didn't really see that in that session up to that point, but maybe he's just pushed the brakes in initially too hard, or rear brake balance setting, or maybe too much downshifting. These are the sort of things that can lock the rear and then throw you into the wall. So we do need to wait and see what happened with that crash. But with Fernando Alonso's crash, very similar to all of the other on-throttle crashes, he's turning through that left-hander of turn 11, applying the throttle, bang, the rear overtakes the front, and then you slide off into the wall. So that was the more classic situation that we saw. Alex's crash was certainly very different. Now, when they restarted the session after these crashes, the track looked like it had significantly less grip. We saw George Russell lock up the front left into turn 4. We saw Yuki Tsunoda go off at turn 4. He locked the rears. We saw Oscar Piastri also spin on the exit of turn 2 as well. So I'm not sure if the drivers were pushing a little bit more or something changed with the track, like temperatures or the rain or whatever, but it looked like significantly less grip. So a really good job by Lando Norris. It was a fantastic pole position lap. We do need to say that to Lando at this point. We'll do our quick message to Argentina as per usual, and then we'll wrap this up. Hola a todos, ojalá que estés bien. Lo siento por lo que pasa en la calificación con Franquito. Creo que es una mal cosa de la manera técnica y también una mal cosa de la manera humana y personal y mentalidad también. Técnica, tienes que hacer el acelerador con mucho cuidado y con el volante como más recto, y también cortar las marchas. Cortar como tú muy tranquilamente, así que puedes caminar el coche más adelante tranquilamente y no como tan rápido. Pero Franco es muy joven, tiene 21 años y pues está aprendiendo mucho también. Pues algo así puede suceder. Entonces no es una culpa de Franco per se, pero en serio creo que su equipo y su equipo de administración y equipo de Williams y enseñadores y esas personas pueden ayudar Franco y mantener que el focus necesita estar en manejando. No es como firmar banderas o tomar fotos con chicas o algo así. Es como necesita el focus. Entonces, Fórmula 1 no es un lugar para relajar y decir, yo estoy aquí en Fórmula 1, estoy seguro. No, Fórmula 1 es un lugar para trabajar, para encontrar enseñadores, encontrar gente que tiene tu interés al corazón y tú puedes y puede intentarte como quieres y mantener los focos. Entonces, no es una culpa de Franco, creo que es una cosa de técnica y de mentalidad o de equipo de Franco que necesita personas buenas, ¿no? En serio, que proteger Franquito de toda la tensión que tiene este fin de semana también. Él es muy joven, debajo mucha presión, en serio, y por eso yo estoy aquí intentando ayudarle, en serio. Hablamos ayer sobre de las líneas de la mojada, la lluvia, Brasil, la presión, la calificación, los neumáticos. Estábamos hablando sobre todo eso. Si estábamos en contacto, podría ayudar. Ojalá que él pueda conseguir unas posiciones en hacer una buena carrera sin errores y pues decimos, ¿no? Decimos antes que es muy importante en Brasil hacer una fin de semana sin errores y sin distracciones y sin todo eso. Pero mira, estoy aquí en YouTube hablando contigo. En serio, es una lástima que no estamos en contacto y no puedo ayudar Franco en persona. Por favor, mándame una comenta, mándame una pregunta debajo y suscríbete a este canal y compartir con tus amigos y con la gente que necesitan saber que yo existe. Gracias, nos vemos. That's all for this video, guys. If you could please give it a thumbs up, ask me a question or comment below. I do my best to get to all of the questions and comments, and share it to a friend who might find this video useful. Thanks. I will see you after the race.